From the late 1800s until the 1960s, lynching, an intimidation technique used to suppress African Americans, was the gruesome, inhumane act of mobs taking the law into their own hands. Most lynchings took place in the southern United States against black men after the Civil War and the 12-year period known as Reconstruction. Black towns began to spring up, and African Americans gained more political and economic power. Attempting to establish racial dominance and to keep power to themselves, angry mobs of whites, later called lynch mobs, took justice into their own hands and brutally executed nearly 5,000 blacks nationwide. One black journalist of the time, Ida B. Wells, documented these acts of terror and led an anti-lynching crusade. Motivated by her encounters with race-based abuse, such as lynching, Ida B. Wells emboldened anti-lynching activists by exchanging her ideas with others. Yet in our current society today, there are parallels between lynching and the police brutality that is used to intimidate and suppress the black population. On January 1, 1863, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring slaves in the rebelling southern states free, eventually causing the end of the Civil War. The 13th Amendment was then ratified in 1865, which freed all slaves in every part of the United States. Following the liberation of the slaves, a great deal of tension arose between blacks and whites, particularly in the South. Many white citizens felt that the influx of competitors into their local economies would cause them financial harm, when, in reality, freed African Americans were often very poor and actually helped struggling plantations to survive by providing inexpensive labor. Many Southerners blamed the Northerners for the freedom of African Americans and the impoverishment of their land, which caused even more racial tension between the whites and blacks in the South. Thus, in the Reconstruction era that followed, many whites were horrified to see the gradual progress African Americans made in terms of economics, equality, and politics. To combat this, black codes were ratified in an effort to stop the advancement of African American power and liberty. Black codes prohibited a black person's access to legal, political, and economic opportunities. White fear of losing this racial preeminence triggered the emergence of lynch law, which the Virginia Lancet, a Republican newspaper, defined as the name given to the summary infliction of punishment by private and unauthorized citizens. Slowly, it became more common around the country, and whites said it was necessary to defend America from African American crime and America's unstable legal system. It took a reporter and journalist, Ida B. Wells, to make aware to the public about what was happening to the South. Ida B. Wells was born a slave on July 16, 1862 to two enslaved parents, James and Elizabeth. Wells's parents both influenced her development into a leader, as her father was an activist who campaigned for black politicians, and her mother was a religious woman who attended university and compelled her daughters to attend with her. At Shaw University, Wells read nearly the entire library, which was strongly encouraged by her mother and had a major effect on her career as a writer. Despite their profound impact on Wells, she was, arguably, most influenced by their deaths. In 1876, while she was traveling in the country, tragedy struck and both of her parents died of yellow fever. Despite doctors telling her not to return to the epidemic-struck area, she rushed home, feeling the duty to take care of her 5 younger siblings, which reflects the self-sacrifice she would later go through for the benefit of her race. Ida B. Wells fought against lynching, violent encounters between whites and blacks in America from the late 1800s to the mid-1900s. It occurred mostly in the South, although it did happen in towns all across the country. Between 1882 and 1968, over 4,500 Americans were lynched. Over 75% of those people were black, 94% of whom were killed by white mobs. Lynching was mostly about making members of the black community fear what would happen if they attempted to become anything more than a second-class citizen. Lynching was accomplished with shootings, hangings, and burning at the stake. Throughout her life, Ida B. Wells encountered the boundaries separating whites and blacks in her community. In 1884, Wells was working as a schoolteacher in Woodstock, Tennessee. On May 4th, she was taking the train home from work, the only black woman in a first-class car, when she had a life-changing encounter with the conductor. The conductor asked her to move to the smoking car, despite Wells having already purchased her first-class ticket. Wells, knowing that submitting would only please the white oppressors, refused to do so. prompting 3 men to drag her into the smoking car. Needless to say, Wells did not take kindly to this and chose to exit the train at the next stop. As soon as she returned home to Memphis, Wells hired a lawyer, sued the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad Company, and, shortly after, was awarded $500 in damages as the railroad had broken the separate but equal doctrine established in the famed 1896 Plessy v. Ferguson case. However, the defense appealed the decision to the Tennessee Supreme Court and the decision was reversed. Despite her eventual loss, this case generated lots of attention from people of all races, as rarely were African Americans so bold against white oppression. This idea of defiance was exchanged frequently among activists, and emboldened Wells to write a column in The Living Way, where she publicly discussed her views on the sensitive topic of her mistreatment on the train. It spread throughout Memphis. She also spread the idea that lynchings were only a method of terrorizing African Americans into conformity in an effort to stop them from taking economic opportunities away from whites, through her other writings, speeches, and protests. She also exchanged her ideas by creating another pamphlet which carried throughout the South, titled Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All Its Phases. She discovered that blacks were lynched for very minute crimes. Though, the biggest impact of this pamphlet came from Wells's claim that many lynchings based on rape were actually consensual interracial relationships that had been found out, and then the black man was punished for violating a white woman. Wells claimed that African Americans were being lynched with no legal authority, and that this murder was worse punishment than the alleged crimes they committed deserved. Through this writing, Wells was able to share her ideas with a great number of people, as her gift for writing inspired those who read her works, impacting many people, both black and white. The unparalleled depth at which she reported on white crime earned her a great deal of respect within her community, and prominent black leaders such as W.E.B. Du Bois asked her for her support in the formation of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or NAACP. The NAACP held various events and marches throughout the years to bring public awareness to the oppression that was occurring throughout the country. At the first NAACP conference, Wells gave a speech, The Awful Slaughter, declaring lynching as an immoral, murderous act. She said lynching should be stopped and perpetrators should be punished. This helped start the NAACP on their journey for black equality. Ida B. Wells had a clear, powerful impact on the anti-lynching movement. She encountered a significant oppression, but despite that, she became educated and in doing so, learned to talk about, write, and exchange her ideas. She was determined to always improve the social standing of African Americans, always exploring new ways to protest to improve the lives of the whole of her community. Her examples set standards for society and protests. However, racial equality is still not perfect today, demonstrated by the parallels between lynching and the police brutality. Lynchings were often public displays used to show that whites could oppress blacks. Today, police still use their power to oppress blacks, even if it is not public. People expose the brutalities more often now through the use of social media, as Wells did in pamphlets and articles. However, many cases of police brutality still go undiscovered. The cases for lynchings almost always went without trial, and the lynchers were encouraged by the whites in the South and the officials who let it happen. Police also receive little to no punishment for their abuse of power. Trayvon Martin was shot and killed for looking suspicious in Florida by the neighborhood watch member George Zimmerman. He was not a police officer, yet he acted in the place of one with no authority and killed the teenager. This murderous act was unnecessary and morally wrong, yet he was not convicted for it. Black people in America are more likely to face illegal types of persecution today because of their race. And although the size of the black population in the United States is about 1/5 of the white, according to The Guardian, black people are 3 times more likely than white people to be killed when they encounter the police in the United States. The NAACP and leaders like Ida B. Wells helped lead the movements to end lynching. Yet today, lynchings and various types of violence are reflected in our society. Most encounters were violent attacks against blacks, and we can still see the oppression of black people and their power through media. The exchanges of ideas, then and now, influenced by brave leaders like Wells, have slowly helped blacks earn their place in American society. But although America is slowly moving forward, the past still echoes in many of our current actions.